A very warm welcome from Joe and I on behalf of HPMA. Absolutely delighted, as we always are, to be with Nick and Sarah this morning from Delve. In the third of our sessions, actually, third of 3 sessions around culture. So today is changing culture, one conversation at a time. So as has been said, just sit back, relax and enjoy, and participate as well through the chat and through other opportunities. But yeah, please do get involved. And just one couple of final things. We will be recording this, so it will be available at a later point on our website. And just a real lovely to see that we've got people from all 4 nations, so thank you so much for putting in on the chat where you're all from. It's absolutely fabulous to see that we've got people from all the 4 nations. So a great community we are, indeed we are. And yeah, I've just seen Alison McCann. Lovely to see you too. That's going back a long while. All right, over to Nick and Sarah. Have a great time. Thank you.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks, Tracy. So welcome to this session. Just give us a virtual hand wave if you were at the last session or the last couple of sessions, or it's fine if you're completely new to it. So a couple of people who are at the last one. Yeah, brilliant. If you have been to all the last couple of sessions, this follows on nicely, but if you haven't, don't worry, because it can be a standalone one as well. But it's brilliant to see some familiar names on the screen, and you'll have met us before previously. Just a bit of a reminder on Zoom: mute button and video button are at the left side. If you can just make sure you're on mute, because it sometimes gets a little bit echoey, that would be brilliant. We, as usual, will be using the chat, so there'll be lots of opportunity for you to have discussions or share ideas through the chat. And also, we'll be doing a couple of polls as well. I've just seen a little comment saying, let us know where you're going next so we can avoid it. Yeah, that's because it always rains on me. So I'm going to Centre Parks in a couple of weeks, the one in Nottingham, so maybe avoid that. Brilliant. Okay, so I'm going to start sharing my screen now. Hopefully everyone can see that okay. Is that all good? Yeah, brilliant. So today is all about the unstoppable organisation and changing culture one conversation at a time, because actually this is the stuff that's going to make a real difference. If you are new today, it's a quick intro from us. So myself and Nick have a small business. We're based in Greater Manchester. That's our building there, actually. We're in a little pod in Ashton Old Baths, which is an amazing old Victorian swimming bath. It's absolutely freezing most of the time, but it's a brilliant place to work, and we absolutely love it. And Nick and I both used to work in the NHS ourselves, so we've experience of working as heads of organisational development in a range of different NHS organisations before we set up Delve in 2015. And our vision is really clear to us. It's something that we're fiercely passionate about. We really want to help organisations to become places where people can thrive, because it obviously benefits individuals, it benefits the organisation, and ultimately wider society as well. So we've grown a lot since we started in 2015, and we tend to do a lot of things around things like leadership development. This is how we achieve our vision. And we've also got a really inclusive talent process, and an organisational development programme that supports people in HR or people new into OD to upskill themselves around organisational development. And we do a lot of team development too, and we tend to, the way some of our programmes work, if you think about our talent tool, for example, it's very much, and this aligns with things that you'll be doing within your culture as well, but it's very much about that discovery phase, so exploring and reviewing the current picture. And this is what we're thinking about today when we're talking about culture, but it's also about delivering and then how to map the talents. One of the things that we do, and one of the ways that we really develop culture, is through our talent programme. So today, so if you come to the last couple of sessions, the first one was all about assessing the gaps, of thinking about the culture that you have and the culture that you want. What does that gap look like, and how might you bridge some of that? And there's a bit of a toolkit for each of the sessions as well, which I'm sure Joe has or will be sending out to just collect some of your thoughts, really. The second session was about unwritten rules and how they might be shaping your culture. And we focus quite a lot on data and the difference between data and insight, and what that actually means. So we'll come back and recap on some of that today as well. But the main aim of this session is about addressing the gap. So how do we really change the culture one conversation at a time? We just found this the other day. You'll have heard of FOMO. Well, this is FOFO. So this is fear of finding out. And just before we move into our final session, we wanted to just remind you of the caveat attached to that last session, which is around looking closely at what the data is telling you. So not just taking it at face value, but what is it telling you? And this is almost the fear of finding out, the fear of getting data that pushes you to confront an issue or make a change or take an action. And once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. We just thought that was a good way to start, really. And when we think about culture, it's more than just a buzzword. We know it's not about how many beanbags you've got or putting table tennis outside. It's created by people, so it's not always that tangible. But if you start to pause and observe the behaviours in your team or your organisation, it can be felt and heard and seen. There are 4 types of culture really in any one organisation, and we talked a bit about unwritten rules last time, but one that's written down is the culture that people see. So that's around the policies and the strategies. So that's the one that's written down. But you've also got the one that people believe exists, the one that people wish exists, and the one that the organisation really needs. And you'll have heard of this term before around culture eating strategy for breakfast. But if we stop and look around us, we can see that the real behaviours of our teams, sometimes these are good, sometimes not. But if we choose to accept the latter, this quickly becomes our norm. So it may not be normal to speak up in meetings, for example, for fear of being aggressively challenged. It might not be normal for staff to support each other, for example. So what are some of the unwritten rules we're seeing? And even though we know things aren't the way it should be, sometimes we choose to accept that. It really becomes the norm, and that's how cultures can start. It's recognising that the culture that your team or organisation needs and understanding what that is. And Nick and I saw this on a poster the other day, actually. So we thought, obviously, whilst strategy, culture eats strategy for breakfast, actually execution eats strategy for lunch. So whilst culture is key, how people execute it, act on it, and do what they say. So not just saying something, but actually living those behaviours has an even bigger impact. And social norms are very much in play here when it comes to execution. So let's have a look at that in a bit more detail. So have a think. I mean, please pop in the chat. When you hear that term social norms or unwritten rules of behaviour, what do you think they are? Just to give you an example, you know, things like a social norm, don't cut somebody up on the motorway, or don't cook fish in the microwave. So some of those things that are social norms, the unwritten rules, and that are considered acceptable in a group or society. If you think about when if you go to the cinema and it's fairly empty, chances are someone will come and sit right next to you. You think, well, why have you done that? Why don't you sit somewhere else? So have a think about what some of the social norms are that you see, some of those unwritten rules of behaviour that are considered acceptable in a group or society. And implementing right social norms for your team should be your number one priority, because once that's right, your team or organisation will perform. And one of the biggest influences that research shows as having a direct impact on culture is social norms. So this is what we perceive as socially normal within the group that we're part of. So we're going to share with you a little experiment. So have a look at this. Which line is the same as the line on the left? Is it A, B, or C? Please type in the chat what you think the answer is. Nick, can you see the chat? Because I can't see it because I'm sharing slides.
So pretty much everybody is saying C is the correct answer.
Brilliant. So it's not a trick question, and you're right, C is the correct answer. But did you know that social norms could actually get you to give the wrong answer as A or B? So a famous research study on the power of social norms was conducted in 1951, and it aimed to investigate how much people's perceptions and behaviours can be influenced by social norms and group pressure. So think about that group thing that you sometimes get in meetings, for example, where we touched on it last time, where it's almost the most powerful person in the room or the most senior person. We are hierarchical in the NHS, we can't get away from that, is the one that everybody looks to, and what they say becomes socially acceptable. So in this experiment, people were asked to identify which comparison line was the same length as the original line. And the catch was that the other participants in the room were actually confederates of the experimenter. So they all gave clearly incorrect answers. And the results showed that participants conformed to the group's incorrect answers a significant amount of the time. So 75% of those participants conformed to that group's incorrect answer at least once, and about a third conformed on more than half of the trials. So it really demonstrated the powerful influence that social norms can have on individual behaviour, even when norms are clearly incorrect. So even when you're thinking, oh, well, it can't be A, but everyone else is saying A, you think, oh, well, I must be wrong. So yeah, it's A. And it shows that people are often willing to change their perceptions and behaviours to fit in with a group, even if it goes against their own beliefs and values. And that study has actually been replicated in many different contexts and had important implications for understanding social influence and group dynamics. So it's really important when we're thinking about culture and how critically important social norms can be when it comes to behaviour change and getting that culture shift that you want. So just to give you a couple of examples, really. So there you go. C is the right answer. So thanks for taking part in that. But again, if we'd had a few people that we'd planted in the room to go, oh, it's A, chances are other people would have picked up on that and thought the same.
There's another really interesting story. You might be familiar with Stanley Milgram, who did the shop experiment, which wouldn't be allowed these days, would it? But Stanley had a researcher stand on a busy street corner in New York City and made them look up to the sky for 60 seconds. So the researcher recorded then how many passers-by stopped to look up at the building as well. Some people did, but what was really interesting is, like the previous experiment, when a confederate joined the researcher, so this is someone who's also in on the study, they found that 4 times as many people then stopped to join the 2 people looking up at the sky. And this effect is exponential. So at one point they had 15 people looking up at the sky, which led to 80% of people looking up and 45% of people actually stopping to look up. So every additional person is proof that something important is happening. And the assumption is that when things are uncertain, the best thing to do is just follow along. And this isn't actually an unreasonable assumption. So after all, if we assume that the group typically knows best, then following the group is a sensible strategy. The catch, however, is that if too many people adopt this strategy, it stops being sensible and then the group stops being smart. So this is when we can see the power of social norms within cultures and how cultures can be derailed by illogical behaviour that can even go against the organisational values. And there's another challenging side to social norms, and certainly the impact on from leadership is all social norms are not weighted equally. So Milgram, 1968, along with a couple of other people, Bickman and Berkowitz, they aim to investigate the power of authority in influencing behaviour. So the study involved 3 experimenters who were dressed in different outfits. So a milkman's uniform, a security guard's outfit, and plain clothes. So the experimenters again were sent onto the street in New York City and asked others to perform various actions. So, for example, picking up litter or giving someone a dime for a phone call. And the researchers really wanted to see how many people would obey the request of each experimenter and whether the experimenter's appearance had any effect on compliance. And the results showed that people were more likely to obey requests made by the experimenter in the security guard's outfit compared to the other 2, which suggests that people are more likely to comply with authority figures who are perceived to have power and authority. And there's been a huge amount of subsequent research that also supports this. I mean, wouldn't it have been great to throw some women in the mix in this experiment? But unfortunately, this was 1968, so that wasn't even considered. But people are often willing to comply with the demands of authority figures, even if it's uncomfortable or even if it's illegal. So it's critical that when we're looking at culture, we need to appreciate the importance of understanding the power dynamics of different social roles and how they influence behaviour. So we know from the studies that we've talked about that when we look up and we see someone role modelling the behaviours that are important to our organisations, we will copy, we will replicate, we will follow. Our status matters, and it's a gift not to be taken lightly. So what we say and what we do have to be congruent, and this can only happen through great conversations. So there's a great phrase: culture is defined by the worst behaviour leaders are willing to accept. But this also includes where their own behaviour misses the mark for driving a good culture. And sometimes this can be unknowingly. Quite often it's unknowingly, if we're honest. So your aspirational culture may be saying one thing, but your manager's behaviour may be saying another. So let's say your comms insist that your culture is caring and that you as a member of staff are really important to the organisation, but then managers aren't having regular check-in conversations with their teams. So we may not see them often, which clearly says in the subtext, we're not important to them. So when you've had a good leader in your life, what communication style have they taken in? What conversations have they had with you? Did they talk and talk and talk, giving you no room at all? Or were they behind a closed door even, or remote? Or did they give you time and space to reflect, learn and innovate? So it's really just thinking around, you know, just thinking around the difference basically between sort of the social norms and the values and the behaviours that you're setting out. And in most organisations, those values are set by the founders, if applicable, or those in the senior team. So in the NHS, this sometimes they sometimes involve others in the process, in the sort of spirit of democracy. But it's really important to start with that clear vision, the clear purpose and a value set. But as organisations grow and leaders' influence on individual teams becomes more remote, it's even harder to ensure that every employee shares and internalises these values. And this is particularly challenging in NHS organisations. So as such, teams can develop new social norms. So where they don't know where to go, they'll develop their own social norms. These might not necessarily be aligned to the values and can in turn prompt the wrong behaviour. So you get this kind of split that occurs. There was one CEO that I worked with who very much believed and was integral to creating their organisational values, and actually had very well-meaning intentions when it came to, you know, involving people and exploring things with people. However, one day she offered to place herself in the canteen, hoping that staff would come over and share their thoughts and share their feedback, and not one person came over. And this was mainly because, although well-intentioned, her behaviour when someone did approach with a challenge or a problem, mainly from her own senior team, wasn't compassionate or caring or respectful. And the unwritten rule was that if you go to this person with an issue, you would get your head bitten off. So the norm then was stealthily communicated down the hierarchy, and that was the perception that everybody held. So that's why nobody approached her. So what you say is therefore crucial to all of this. What conversations are taking place between people and their line managers? We know conversations matter. We have our own Delve code, actually, that is our own version of what conversations should include. And you'll have some reference to this in your toolkit, but let's break this down a little bit more for you.
So if you're thinking about communication, I don't know if you've come across this before, it's by Clampett et al. And they talk about different types of communications techniques. So when we think about communication, we typically think about leadership comms, the formal stuff that's about a change going ahead, for example, but it's obviously happening all the time. And those conversations that are happening from managers and leaders are going to be setting the tone. I think a couple of people mentioned in the chat, actually, leaders have that really vital role when it comes to culture. So if you haven't come across this before, I'll just talk you through them. But as I'm talking through them, we're going to do a quick poll in a minute, because we want you to have a think about which of these you see the most in your organisations. It's all anonymous, so it's absolutely fine. But I'll talk you through each of them in turn and think about where you get the most in your own organisations. So the first one's spray and pray. So this is where leaders shower people with all kinds of information in the hopes that they'll be able to sort out what's significant from the insignificant information. And you might think, more information equals better communication, but it probably doesn't really, because it's really hard for people to sort that out when you think about how many emails we get. And I think it's really difficult within the NHS and complex organisations to get communication right. You know, how do you communicate to so many people in so many different roles who potentially might not have access to IT facilities as readily as others as well? So sometimes we're in danger of just spray and pray, send everything out and hope some of it will land. The next approach is tell and sell. So this is where leaders select a limited set of messages regarding really core organisational issues. So they'll tell people about the issues and then sell to their staff members their ideas on the wisdom of their approach. And Clampitt argues that this is a telltale sign of this, is when leaders spend the majority of their time planning sophisticated presentations, but devote little energy to fostering meaningful dialogue with people about concerns related to the proposals. So it's very much that tell and sell approach. Underscore and explore. So here leaders focus on fundamental issues related to change, success, and allow people the creative freedom really to explore various possibilities. So such leaders assume that communication isn't complete until they know how people react to those ideas. So they're concerned not only with developing a few core messages, but also really listening attentively for potential misunderstandings and questions as well. So they underscore an idea or a concept or a new initiative that might be coming in, but they give people opportunity to explore what that means in practice. And then you've got identify and reply. So this is different to the above because it takes more focus on staff member concerns to hear leaders listen to and identify key concerns and then respond to those issues as they are brought up. The assumption is that your staff members or your teams are in the best position to know the critical issues. However, there is a danger with this because they might not know enough to even ask the right questions. So if you've not underscored and explored some of that, it's difficult for them to reply or respond to that if they've not got all the information that they need. And then the final one is withhold and uphold. So here leaders withhold information as much as possible. It's that need to know only basis. And when confronted by questions or rumours, they very much uphold the party line. And secrecy and control are often quite implicit values of those who embrace this approach. And I can pretty much guarantee that for the majority of us, the best leaders we've had will probably sit somewhere in the middle of this curve. And these conversations are really important, most commonly the one-to-one type conversations, but it's important to think about what that means. But I'm just going to stop sharing the slides a minute, and is it okay if we launch a poll? Just see what you think. So hopefully you'll see this pop up on your screen. So which of those communication styles do you see most in your organisation? Just give everyone a chance to vote on that. Joe, I can't see the numbers coming in. So
I'll let you know. We're at 42
Brilliant.
out of 79. So
okay, we'll just give you another minute. I think you can put more than one as well, so you might see a few.
Thanks everyone for contributing in the chat as well. It's really interesting I know we don't get a lot of time for interaction on these short webinars, but if you do have things that are working for you and ideas, please do put them in chat because people are reading them.
Absolutely.
right, I think we've maybe reached.
Yeah.
We're at the top, we're going to reach it. 68 people have responded, so I'll end the poll for you and you can see the results.
Brilliant, thanks Joe. Okay, so everyone can see those results now. So we've got 46% saying spray and pray. And again, I think there are a lot of challenges when communicating. So, you know, you are likely to see a lot of that. We've also got tell and sell up there as one of the highest as well. And interesting, we've only got 10% saying they're seeing that underscore and explore. If you are in that 10%, it'd be brilliant to share on the chat if you've got some brilliant ways that you think communication is successful in your organisation. Any clues or tips will be really helpful for people. We've also got identify and reply and withhold and uphold there as well, but that's interesting that spray and pray and tell and sell are the most common ones. And actually, if you're seeing some of those less helpful communication styles at an organisation level, it's thinking about what's that telling you about how you like to be communicated with, and how can you encourage perhaps some of the underscore and explore, for example, in smaller one-to-one conversations, which we'll come on to. And Christina, you're absolutely right. It takes the most short-term effort, actually. So it's interesting. Some of these don't take much effort at all. Spray and pray, just get it out there. We've communicated now. We've got everything out there. Doesn't take much effort, does it? But actually, when you compare that to the value you're getting from that communication, it can be quite powerful. So we'll just close the poll. I'm just going to share my screen again. So yeah, so as we said, you know, underscore and explore take the most effort, but actually is one of the best ways to have that communication style, and think about how that can be. And it tends to probably be more in those one-to-one spaces that we have that time and space to do the underscore and explore. But why exactly are these conversations so important to get right? There was a study actually by Harvard Business Review that found that effective one-to-one meetings can lead to higher levels of performance, with team members who feel they receive quality feedback from the manager outperforming their peers by 19.3%. So that's massive, actually. So if you're having one-to-ones, people feel that they're performing a lot higher than people who aren't getting those one-to-ones. So it is really, really important. And what starts to get even more exciting, though, is when we look at that return on investment. So a study by Metrics Global estimated that consistent, regular, meaningful one-to-ones produced a 529% ROI, and that's astronomical. But actually further studies have found that actually this increase, when you take into account the effect that one-to-one meetings have on retention, which, as you know, is incredibly costly, it then actually climbs to a 700, I can't even say that, it's not even a percentage, is it? 788%. So that's massive, that return on investment. So you can see there the impact of having meaningful one-to-ones. And sometimes I was chatting to some people on a session yesterday, and they were saying sometimes it feels a bit like, particularly when you've got CQC and staff survey, you know, you're being rated quite publicly. It can be tempting to go, well, you know, we just need to make sure one-to-ones are happening or appraisals are happening, because then we can tick the box and, you know, 95% of people are having a one-to-one. But actually, how meaningful is that? Is that taking that underscore and explore approach, or is it tell and sell or spray and pray? You know, you've got to take that into account as well, because it has such a massive impact. And whilst the benefits of these conversations are clear, we know that in the NHS that resource is a real challenge, and that might lead to things like uphold and withhold or spray and pray. But where these meaningful conversations are not happening, we tend to see that, and we see it, as I said, in our staff surveys, in poor response rates, in general disengagement and high turnover. And let's have a think about what do underscore and explore conversations look like in practice. And as we said, please feel free to pop things in chat as we're talking through. But I was chatting to a paediatric doctor recently who said that whilst pay is obviously a hot topic at the moment, it's not actually in the top 3 issues for them or those that they work with. So, and you'll know some of this. They said it's actually working conditions, unrealistic expectations and demands, and most importantly, a lack of support and recognition sometimes as well. So the biggest form of support in their role tended to be more junior colleagues, in that they're all great. All that they're craving actually was a proper conversation with their manager or with their senior consultant that recognises the good work that they're doing and truly listen to them. And how is it that in a situation as complex as it is, we're missing those 2 really key and easy things to do, which is recognising when people do good work and truly listening to them. So how can we support our leaders to have those better conversations, and how do you bring underscore and explore to life within your own cultures? A perfect example, we talked about this last time, if you remember. Perfect example of an underscore and explore conversation is a stay interview. So some of you mentioned that you were already working on these if you came to that last session. So we talked, if you weren't here, we were talking about exit interviews, but actually sometimes it's too late by the time somebody's walking out the door. What you need to be having is a stay conversation. And actually, if you think about it, each conversation that you have with your manager, each one-to-one, is essentially a stay interview or a stay conversation. So how do we make that the norm?
So keeping it really simple, at a top level, every one-to-one, every conversation should include 3 key things. And you might even decide to take these away for your own one-to-ones or conversations you're having with those you support in roles. But let's look at these a little bit more closely. So in thinking about reflection, how many conversations do we invite staff to reflect on what's gone well and not so well? So how quick are managers to jump straight into feedback if these conversations are even happening? So some of the best learning happens when you give people the space to look back on the past week or the month, or usually not much longer than that, because the pace of how we work now has sped up like massively, hasn't it? So no more than a week or a month is usually the best kind of time scale. But it also helps them to focus on some of the positives. We've all seen it when people feel beat down because we're so focused on never events and we don't give any space to always events. And what we're always getting right. So this can be really incredibly demotivating and demoralizing. And imagine hearing from your own line manager the things that you're getting right week after week and how you'd feel listening to that. So as a manager, we can give that opportunity to reflect on, yes, what's not gone so well, but also what has, and keeping that balance right. Then when we think about feedback and recognition, there's a great book, if you've come across it, by Kim Scott called Radical Candor, Be a Kick-Ass Boss Without Losing Your Humanity. And that's where sometimes we're sadly lacking with that humanity. And this is where this model's come from. So Radical Candor, it involves 4 quadrants, as you can see on the screen there, based on 2 axes of care personally and challenge directly. So ruinous empathy, as you can see there, this occurs when a manager cares personally for an employee, but fails to challenge them directly. So as a result, employees might not receive the feedback they need to improve, and they might become quite complacent in their work. Then you've got obnoxious aggression. This occurs when a manager challenges employees directly, but doesn't show personal care for them. So this can lead to really, negative and unproductive workplace relationships. And we know where that can lead with our absence and people going off on, people going off work. Then we've got manipulative insincerity. I need my teeth in to say that. But this occurs when a manager neither cares personally or challenges directly. So in this quadrant, managers tend to avoid giving feedback, leading to a lack of accountability and no growth opportunities for your people. The best place we want to be is that radical candor. So this occurs when a manager shows both personal care and direct challenge. And this is the sweet spot that encourages honest, direct communication, but also creates a positive work environment. So we often use this model in conjunction with difficult conversations around performance, helping leaders to explore the intention behind the difficult conversation that you actually have to have. Because actually, ultimately, if you explore it deeply, you do care about that person that you have to have the difficult conversation with. You also care about others on the team. Therefore, that's why you want that person to change their behaviour. So when we have personal care and direct challenge, managers can create a culture of feedback and growth in the workplace, which leads to more productive, more positive outcomes for both employees and the whole organisation. And then finally, thinking about the support and development, this is an essential aspect of a one-to-one conversation because it provides an opportunity for employees to talk about their career goals, their aspirations, any challenges they're facing in their professional development, and importantly, how a manager can support them. And just very briefly, just wanted to mention, Sarah mentioned earlier about our talent tool. If you're looking for an alternative to current appraisal process, please do get in touch at a later time. Our tool develops managers to have a structured coaching conversation with team members following this model. So starting with purpose in the centre and moving out and exploring where that person sees themselves, whether it's nurture, flourish or grow. This leads to specific support and development based on their individual needs and situation. It's very inclusive and certainly explores conversation topics that go way beyond objective setting and wish list development plans. So great conversations needn't be prescriptive, but they do benefit from a sensible structure.
So the three main things should include reflection, feedback and recognition, and support and development. They're the essential components of any conversation. And previously, you'll remember if you came to one of the earlier sessions, we introduced Simon Sinek's Start With Why. So we should also be making time for conversations about purpose. Why do people choose to work here? What's important about the way that they work, and what are they doing really well? But where do we start with that? And one of the key things to remember, we talked a lot about data last time, but it's almost, how do we turn that data into a story? You might have seen this image before, but it really resonated with me because we think turning data into a compelling story is key. It's all right seeing loads of stats and statistics and, you know, for example, you're 4 times more likely to die if you live in Manchester. Well, that's a stark fact, but actually it's not particularly inspiring if you're wanting to win over hearts and minds or change culture. So data and insights, as we said last time, is really critical, but actually if people can't connect with it, you're not going to get them on board. And when we use a story that people can relate to with a compelling narrative, that's where change usually happens. So you can see, for example, there, if you think about all the data that we collect, you know, we sort it out, we arrange it, we might present it visually, but actually if we're explaining it with a story, that's what's going to get people on board to change or move forward in terms of the culture. And we really like this quote actually, because you can't appeal to people with data and facts alone. You also need to account for how people feel. And if you can provide greater meaning and purpose to their efforts, amazing things are possible. So this quote for us, so Dr. Bob Nelson is one of the world's leading experts on recognition, motivation and engagement. And how we do this is through the art of the conversation. So again, you might remember this from a previous session, but diffusion of innovation model. So we know that actually you need to focus on your early adopters. And we can sometimes get into trying to focus on everyone within the organisation. So some big comms scheme that says, right, you know, as of Monday, everybody's doing weekly one-to-ones with their team, spray and pray, hope for the best. And it's the quickest type of intervention to fail for a number of reasons, but one of which is because we're trying to mass target the whole organisation. So it doesn't work and we need to be smarter. And with what we know now, we know that targeting a few teams is the best way to go. So a lot of you, I'm sure, do little pilots, and that's brilliant because actually it's a team in every core area of your organisation potentially that you need to focus on. And culture shifts don't happen overnight. So focusing on where change can start happening, focusing on a few teams, testing it out, getting that social proof that it works, and then let the grapevine do its work. You know, we've talked about formal communication channels, but we know also how powerful informal networks are. But taking this approach and finding your early adopters is also smart because it uses our resources wisely. We can either try to give everything to everyone or focus small and let the initiative grow organically. You know, what team isn't going to think, oh, well, what are they doing there? Actually, they're really improving the performance or the turnover. We want some of that for us as well. So it can't be underestimated how impactful that the grapevine can be. And I'm sure we've all seen it where rumours have gone around the workplace faster than fire can spread. And that's because we know how powerful conversations are when it comes to culture. And just to give you an example, actually, one organisation that we've been working with on a leadership programme. So we're actually on cohort 9 of the leadership programme, and you'll know there's different ways that you can embed leadership programmes. We tend to find that where we're working with organisations where it's a mandatory requirement that leaders come on the leadership programme, there's a lot less engagement from those participants than actually if you badge it up as, oh, you've got this real opportunity to develop, places are limited, you need to complete an application form and show why you're interested in it, can have a lot more impact. So with this particular organisation, we're on cohort 9 of this programme, and for the last we had to put some extra cohorts on because 80 people applied for 15 places, because actually the power of that grapevine and people telling other people about that programme has been amazing. It can have a real positive impact as well as a negative impact, the grapevine. So it's really important that we think about that and understand how we can use that grapevine effectively. And again, one of the things that we said we'd talk about in this session, you know, is also getting the board on board with ideas. And it's one of the key components of any culture change is that role modelling from the start. We've mentioned it today, we've talked about it in the chat as well, that your senior leaders have the biggest impact on culture, and having clear board champions that So just say they support something, but actively promote it, and get involved is so important. And a lot of organisations are built on a basic blueprint that peaked in the industrial age and operate on that principle called predict and control. So seek to achieve stability and success through upfront planning and centralised control. And while this worked out okay in the past, in today's VUCA world, that volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous world that we work in, it's very, very different. Organisations aren't adaptable enough. The first culture challenge is how our organisations are structured. Now, we can't really do anything about that in the short term because, you know, we're dealing with a massive beast. But what we can do is appreciate we have to work even harder to get involvement from our senior leaders and exec teams. And that sometimes means taking a really different approach. A few years ago, Bupa wanted to influence their senior leadership team around wellbeing. So they had a struggle on their hands because the leadership team were A, busy, and B, removed from the majority of the staff as well. So rather than take leaders to the issue, the HR team brought the issues to the team. So they got iPods that they sourced, and one had an MP3 file, so it's a while ago, MP3 file on there. And it was about staff telling their story and team members talking about what the reality was like for them. So the leaders had the space to listen and really take in what was going on for their teams, and the impact was actually massive, such a powerful and persuasive message. But if they presented another lengthy report, which is tend to what we have to do through committees, actually that probably wouldn't have gone down quite as well. So let's think about what our approach might be. And we often take that tell and sell approach. So we talked about that earlier when we're presenting ideas to the board, because that's all we have time for. But how much are we often involving them? And we already know that if most senior teams are visibly demonstrating positive social norms, this is going to have a huge impact on the rest of the organisation. We said before that we look up. So an underscore and explore approach might work really well if you do get the opportunity to do that. And often we tend to, when we go with business cases or proposals to those more senior than us, we might have a preconceived idea of how they might feel about it or react to it, or we may not even have considered it, but we don't have to wait until the board meeting to understand their view. Even if you only get to a couple of people, it's likely to have a better feel of what the board's view is if you're able to have those more offline conversations, really. If you're presenting something, just get a couple of people on board with you and on side in advance. Out playing the game a little bit, isn't it? But think about the data and the persuasive story that you can tell through your insights. So if you look back at webinar 2, we explore the type of data you can use when it comes to culture, and it's critical to include all areas of quantitative and qualitative data if you can, to build up that really robust pitch, but be mindful that it's the stories that really sell and influence. So if you remember the Bupa story, it's the same for any situation where influence needs to take centre stage. You know, we've all seen the charity adverts, for example, and things like Red Nose Day, the stories are the most powerful influencer there. So it's being clear on that, but sharing some of those stories. One organisation I used to work with, we always used to start every board meeting or committee meeting with a story, whether that was a patient or a staff member. And if we could, we'd get them to come along and share their story firsthand, just to set the scene, because it has the most impact. And involving the board in the culture change process can really help them to feel more invested. Providing those opportunities for them to provide input and updating them on progress can help. And people tend to like ideas that they've had input towards as well. It's that natural human behaviour. But it's really important, again, just you're thinking about your own organisations, how involved are your senior leaders? Nick and I, again, we run quite a lot of leadership programmes, and for a lot of those programmes, people have a project that they need to deliver, or it doesn't have to be anything big, but we tend to have a celebration event at the end of that, where the idea is that those leaders can present that back to their exec teams. We encourage the exec team to come along. And we've had a couple of sessions in the last few weeks, one organisation where every single member of the exec team came to that celebration event. So the people who've been on that leadership programme felt valued, they felt like they had a voice, they felt like they could get some support for their project. It was only an hour and a half out of those exec team's day, but they came and they really supported that. We had another one where there was one exec team member that was supposed to come along, but they didn't end up coming. They sent a deputy who only came for half of it. So that was a really senior leadership programme, and we'd sold it as an opportunity to present your idea to the board, and nobody was there. So you can imagine the impact that had was completely the opposite to the first example that I shared with you. So it's so important that people are doing what they're saying they're doing, not just words on a piece of paper. You're on mute, Nick.
Apologies, my dog started barking, so I was trying to get myself on mute. Yeah, I mean, don't worry if you haven't got access to the boardroom. Thinking about how you might influence, it might not be for everybody, but there's always a way to influence through other people. And if you have great tips here, please do pop them in chat if something's worked well for you. Like the Bupa idea, if you've tried something very different and it's got people involved in a different way, it'd be great to share that. But we just wanted to share with you, just leave you with a final activity, which is hugely powerful. We use this a lot in our coaching relationships as well as on the leadership programs, but it's a very useful thing to map out your personal network. So there's me in the middle. I'll just put myself in this example. There's me in the middle there, and there's 4 people. Some of these may be board members, some of them may just be, you may have people on the periphery as well who don't even know you exist. Actually, would be really useful for you to go and reach out to them and introduce yourself and talk about your role and what you're trying to do. But let's imagine these people are sort of in our immediate site. We've got person A there. So with person A, we've represented that relationship with quite a thick line because we go way back. We've worked together for over 5 years. We have a great relationship. I know person A's family, or I don't know them, but I know of them. I know where they're going on holiday. We connect on a real human level as well as a work level. So I've represented that really lovely relationship that I've got with person A with that thick black line. And then if you think about person C there, we've got, it's less so, we're very civil, we get on, have a bit of a laugh in a meeting, you know, seem to be on the same page, but there's still some work to do to really develop a more meaningful relationship. So I've represented that with a slightly thinner line. And then we've got person B. So person B, I don't really know, we've smiled, said hello, very, very kind of on the surface, small talk, but again, quite a lot of work to do to develop that relationship. And then we've got person D in the corner there. That's barbed wire or lightning strikes, however you want to view that. Oh my goodness, person D, always on the different page to me. We don't see eye to eye. We always seem to be battling from opposite directions, and there's just a huge amount of work to do to build that relationship because we're just not sparking. But the point of this is when you analyze your relationship with all of those people in your networks, it's not always about you having to influence everybody. And the way we do this is we analyze other people's relationships as well. So when we look at person A's relationship with person B, person B needs some work. I'm not probably going to be able to influence that person because I've not yet developed that trust and that relationship to really get them on board. Whereas person A also has a really strong relationship with person B. So why don't I try and influence A to influence B on my behalf? And when you start to map this out and build it all on a page, obviously don't put names on it and then leave it on a bus because that would be quite controversial. But it does help you to kind of think, okay, where are my ways I can influence? Where are the opportunities I've not even thought about? So a really, really useful thing. And you do have to write it down to see it visually for it to have its most impact. So on that note, let's just recap on where we've been today. We're nearly out of time. So today's all been about how we change the culture one conversation at a time. We've talked about social norms and the power of authoritative figures having role modeling behaviours. We've talked about conversation basics and communication styles. We've talked about the different ways we can get the board involved or other senior managers involved, and how we need to consider different and innovative approaches. So just have a little think, what's resonated for you? What are you going to take away to try? And as always, we'd love to hear how you get on. So please do get in touch with us. Our details are on the screen, and we'll look forward to seeing you at future HPMA webinars as well. And thank you for all your input. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Have a great day.
Sorry, yeah, good luck. I'm back again. I thought I was talking to you then and I was on mute. So I was, you know, we never learn, do we? How many times, how many years have we been doing this? A huge thank you once again, Nick and Sarah. So much rich content, I think, that you've shared with us, and colleagues on the call, please do put your feedback in the text, as well as we will be emailing you with the opportunity to fill an evaluation form in. So please do respond. But yeah, so much rich information from both of you. Thanks again, Nick and Sarah. And the takeaways, I mean, you asked, didn't you, what is it that we're going to use? I think for me, there was lots there this morning about the clam pit. I think, have I got that right? Was that the right one? But the one that really, clam pit, I'm thinking of the Beverly Hillbillies there, aren't I? Showing my age. But the phrase that you've got, that you had, which was, if we need to empower and engage, the system design must concentrate power at the top. That has been like a huge light bulb for me this morning, just thinking about, you know, if we really do have to put effort, which we do, don't we? We've all talked about engagement, how we're going to engage our staff that's going to contribute to retention, etc. But actually, fundamentally, how do we tip it? How do we turn it on its head and invert the pyramid, really? I guess that's where that phrase took me to thinking about what work do we need to do to invert that pyramid so that it occurs naturally, so that actually we don't need an engagement strategy. You know, we don't need to have focused attention on it, because it's just the way we are. So
you're right, Tracy. I think, but the problem is, like Sarah mentioned, about the blueprint of how our organisations are designed based on the industrial age. So we've got a long way to go to kind of really flip this model. And if anyone's read Frederick Laloux, he talks about teal organisations. That is so insightful. If you want to, it's not an easy read, I'll be honest with you, but it's really insightful if you skim read about what teal organisations look like and how organisations have actually developed from the time when people first came together in groups to now, where we've got business organisations. So really, really good book to consult.
Yeah. So a big thank you from me, because I will ponder on that one for some time. Some lovely comments coming through. I see them all in the chat. So thank you to everybody for that. Somebody said they've got a one-to-one later.
Oh, good luck, Laura.
So that's brilliant, isn't it? Just to take it out of this morning and then to use it in the day is exactly what we want. That's what we're here for, to help and support and just give that development one step at a time. So once again, Nick and Sarah, and a huge thank you on behalf of Joe and I from HPMA, and for all colleagues on the call. Please do take care, have a good day, get in touch with us, let us know what's helpful and what you'd like to see more of, but my best wishes once again. Okay then, bye-bye for now.
Bye everybody.
Everyone.